Hey guys, welcome back. We're going through our series on the prophets and the kings, and today we're going to be looking at the prophet Elisha and some experiences he had with two different women. And Elisha was the one that was being discipled by Elijah. And if you read the previous chapters to what we're looking at today, we see where Elijah was taken up in a fiery chariot, and Elijah was taken, and Elisha was given the mantle and a double portion of his spirit. So go back and read that. I'm not going to cover that today. But we're in 2 Kings chapter 4 and starting in verse 1. The first recorded part of Elisha's ministry here, kind of really where the rubber meets the road, where he starts interacting with other people. Chapter 4, verse 1, "And a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, 'Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know that your servant feared the Lord. And the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves.'" So it sounds like they owed some money, some considerable amount of money, enough to take the sons as slaves. This woman is in a tough situation. She does not know what to do. And so she comes to the prophet Elisha, saying, "You know what? He was one of yours. You're probably discipling him or teaching him in the way of the Lord to serve other people, and he's died now. And how are you going to repay his service?" She's going to the only one that can help. And so it's interesting response what Elisha says. So Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? What can I do?" And then he says, "Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil." Now, as we look at her house, what's left? It sounds like she's sold her furniture, sold the couch, sold the car, sold the dog maybe. Nothing's left but a jar of oil. No stores of food, nothing is left. It's all been sold, I'm sure, to try to pay off this creditor, this person that holds their debt. She's in a tough spot, isn't she? You would say that she is poor. She has nothing but a little jar of oil. And you could say this is a pretty helpless spot she's in. She's coming to the man of God for help because she does not know what to do. Then he says, notice this, "Go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shut the door behind you, and your sons, then pour it into all those vessels and set aside the full ones." So the prophet says, you know what, go do something out of the ordinary. Go borrow a bunch of Tupperware. A bunch of vessels and jars and empty things. And then lock yourself in your house and empty the oil into those things. And imagine she's thinking, you know what, this is absurd. But what other option does she have? So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." She had taken that little jar of oil and poured it out and poured it, and filled up every jar that she had. What if she had had more? It's interesting here, she was blessed by the amount of her faith. I don't know how many vessels she had, but she filled them all up with oil. Now, oil is a precious commodity. It's not easy to come by. It's expensive. Even today, it's expensive. And she's amazed by this. It says, and the son said to her, "There is not another vessel. There's no more. They're all full." So the oil ceased. It stopped. It wasn't an unlimited amount. It was enough for her faith. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt. You and your sons live on the rest." And so here we have Elisha telling her what to do with it. You go sell it. Pay the debt. I'm sure it was the debt was acquired honestly, but the debtor needed paid. And so God doesn't leave the debtor hanging. He pays the debt. She goes and pays the debt. And then there's more left. And so God provides not only just enough to pay the debt, but more. And I look at this story, and you could say, maybe she needs to go get a job or do these other things. She had no other options. They were going to come and take her sons. Does God care about the poor? Yeah, he does. And so I think we need to be looking at society today, and there's people around us. Jesus tells the disciples, the poor you're always going to have with you. But sometimes this little bit of help can go a long ways. I'm sure she took that money that she got from selling the oil and paid the debt off, and then, you know what? This is all we have. We have no way to continue. The oil's not still running, and so we need to use this wisely. The story ends there. We don't know what else happens. But there's another story following this. Verse 8 says, "Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. And so it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there and eat some food." Now, in your translations, you may look there, and it might not say notable woman, it might say rich woman. It doesn't say that her husband was rich. It's interesting. She was a notable woman. She had means. And what was she doing with that? Well, she saw the prophet walk by her house, and she says to herself, you know what? He looks hungry. I'm going to feed him. Invites him in. And every time he passes by, she feeds him. I wonder if it was just him or other people that she fed too. She had the gift of hospitality. This is such an important thing. So it was, and as often as he passed by, he would turn in there and eat some food. And they started building this relationship. And so she takes the next step. Verse 9 says, "And she said to her husband," she was married, "Look now, I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please, let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand, and so it will be, whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there." To give him a place to be, a place to rest, a place to stay while he's on his journey coming through there. This is hospitality to a whole nother level. They put an addition on to their house, using their means as a blessing to other people. I think this is an important thing for us to look at. Verse 11 says, "And it happened one day that he came there, and he turned in to the upper room and lay down there." He took a nap. "And then he said to Gehazi, his servant," this is the servant of Elisha, "Call the Shunammite woman." And he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, "Say now to her, look, you have been concerned for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army?" He's wanting to reciprocate this love and care that he's been given by this woman. And so he's wondering if there's some favor or something that's going on in her life. And I want you to notice what her response is. And she answered, I dwell among my own people. She says, I have enough. I'm with my people. And so he said, what then is to be done for her? Well, Gehazi pipes up, the servant of Elisha. Actually, she has no son, and her husband is old. We've had stories like this throughout the Bible where it's like impossible for children to be, and God makes a way. And so this is not what she's asking for, but Gehazi is recognizing. So he said, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then he said, about this time next year, you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. Don't play around. I know how things work. My husband is old, and it's just not going to be. And then there's this word that changes everything in verse 17. But the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. God gave her a son. And the child grew. And now it happened one day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And if he's old enough to do this, this is some time has passed. Elisha has maintained this relationship with this family, coming and staying in their house when he came through. And the boy goes out to help his father, and he said to his father, my head. He's having a hard time. So he said to a servant, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken to him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees until noon and then died. Heat stroke or something. Imagine the anguish. She had come to terms that she wasn't going to have children, and then God gives her a child, and then he dies. Imagine the roller coaster. Then she called to her husband. Verse 21. Then she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. And then she called to her husband and said, please, send me one of the young men, one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back. Doesn't even tell her husband that the son had died. And so he said, why are you going to him today? It is neither new moon nor the Sabbath. It's not time to go to church. She says, it is well. And then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slack the pace for me unless I tell you. And so she departed and went to the man of God on Mount Carmel. And so it was, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to his servant Gehazi, I recognize it. Look, it's the Shunammite woman. Please now run to meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And so he goes ahead and she answers to him, it is well. But was it well? It wasn't. People sometimes don't always come out that it's not well. Now when she had come to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet, grabbed a hold of him. But Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress. And the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. He recognizes that there's something going wrong. This is not going right. And she comes to the man of God. Doesn't come to her husband, doesn't come to the servant of the man of God, but comes to the man of God, comes to God with the hard questions. And you know what? God can take those hard questions. So she said, did I ask for a son of my Lord? She didn't ask, remember? Did I not say, do not deceive me, don't lie to me? She's on this roller coaster. She's wondering what God is doing. Then he said to Gehazi, get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child. Go, he says, maybe this will help him. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. I think of Jacob holding on to Christ there in wrestling. He says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. This is what we need to do with God. Hold on. Hold on through the hard times. Now Gehazi went ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. He was dead. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, the child has not awakened. The prayer isn't answered. Even when we try our best, our plans don't always work out the way we want. But the woman is still there, clinging to Elisha, not giving up. When Elisha came into the house, there was the child laying dead on his bed. Now I'm sure he had remembered the story of Elijah with the widow at Zarephath and what Elijah did. So he went in and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to the Lord. This prayer, I'm sure, was a really strong prayer, asking God, why did you give her a child if you're going to let him die? The same question, I'm sure, that she had. And when he went up, he lay on the child, same like Elijah did, and put his mouth on his mouth, and his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands, and he stretched himself out on the child, almost like mouth to mouth, CPR. And the flesh of the child became warm, but still not yet back to life. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. The relief, the joy that Elisha had. Wow. He called Gehazi and said to her, call this Shunammite woman. And he called her, and she came in to him. He said, pick up your son. So she went in and fell at his feet and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. We see here this resurrection, a taste of what we're going to experience when Jesus comes. We see this rich woman had everything, but God gave her more, a more relationship. And when it was the devil tried to take it from her, God restored. We see the poor woman had nothing, and God gives her a restored life, an income, a way to have dignity and keep her children. Does God care about the poor? Yes. Does God care about the rich? Yes, because God is involved in our lives. And so when we have a hard time, because the rich woman and the poor woman, they both had a hard time. When we have the hard time, where did they go? When they had a hard time, where did they go? Where should we go when we have a hard time? They went to God. That's what we should do. And there's 2 more short stories that God does some miracles with Elisha. I always get them mixed up. Then Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. Now the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, and said to the servant, put a large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. So one went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered it from a lapful of wild gourds. And he came and sliced them in the pot and of stew, though they did not know what they were. They just found some random things in the forest and threw them in. Hopefully, we're going to eat. Then they were served to the men to eat, and now it happened. They were eating the stew, and they cried out and said, "Man of God, there is death in the pot. We're dying." And they could not eat it. And so he said then, "Bring some flour," and he put it in the pot, and they said, "Serve it to the people that they may eat." And there was nothing harmful in the pot. You know, God cared about the people to eat, even though there was a famine, and you know what? God provided. And then one last little story. Then a man came from Baal-shalsha and brought the man of God bread and of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley bread and newly ripened grain in his knapsack, and said, "Give it to the people that they may eat." He said, he's bringing offerings and said, this is what they're for, to help others. And this is what our offerings are to be, to help others. But his servant said, "What? Shall I set this before 100 men? How are they going to eat enough?" And he said again, "Give it to the people that they may eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left over." So he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. Now, this happens again in the New Testament with Jesus and the feeding of the 5,000. God makes the food stretch. God makes it happen. He cares about the people that are eating. He cares about the people that are in debt. He cares about the people that have lost loved ones. He cares. And he protects. And so we need to come to him with those problems. Come to him with the things going on in our life, whether it's what we're eating or what we're doing in our life or our jobs or whatever it is, the hardships. We need to come and ask for help. And then we need to listen, right? We need to listen. All of those people listened to what the prophet said and followed it, and God blessed. Let's pray. God, thank you for being in our lives. And as we come to you with help, asking for help, I pray you give it to us. Give us the eyes to see what to do in the impossible situations, whether it's a debt or a loss of someone or hardship or controversy or whatever it is. Give us insight of what to do. Sometimes we feel like there's death in the pot. But Lord, you've got solutions. Give us insight into those in your name. Amen. Hey guys, thanks for being with me. We're on to another story next week. And so come back and we'll have another story from the prophets and the kings. Have a blessed week.